Ecuador voted on Sunday to prevent unlimited re-election of public officials, effectively barring the former president Rafael Correa from running again for president in 2021. The National Electoral Council said around 64% of voters supported changing the rules on term limits. Voters also backed 6 other questions proposed by President Lenín Moreno, one of which will probably result in Correa supporters being removed from key oversight positions. The others dealt with land speculation, oil and mining production, and stronger penalties for corruption and child sex abuse.
Everyone, beginning with the government, is obliged to make true this mandate without any delay. We are obliged to respect and honor the voice of our people, to be consistent with this clear and powerful victory that the yes had.
The former President Rafael Correa had been campaigning for a no vote to 3 of the questions. He told Telesur that his campaign had been silenced by media and that the result was a good starting point for future opposition.
To anyone who knows Ecuador's politics, this is a great triumph for our political movement. To obtain 36% of the results while campaigning against everyone from the far right to the far left, with the media informing in favor of the government and against us, with a biased National Electoral Council that didn't allow our propaganda for close to 10 days, we obtained 36% of the votes in the questions we campaigned for people to vote no on. Those were questions 2, 3 and 6. They obtained 64%, but 37 political organizations were campaigning for a yes vote.
Our correspondent Pablo Vivanco has more on the referendum results.
We've come to the end of a long voting day here in Ecuador, and the results from a quick count from the National Electoral Council have given a victory to the yes campaign in each of the 7 votes, registering between 63% and 74% in favor of the yes side, depending on the actual question. Now, the turnout was about 74%, which is lower than is usually registered here in the country, and the yes campaign won all of the provinces with a notable exception of Manabí, the province that was hit by the earthquake in 2016. Now, President Lenín Moreno also took to the airwaves, making a televised address as the quick count vote was being televised by the National Electoral Council, saying this is an overwhelming victory for all of us, and it shows us that the future will not be stopped. Former President Correa, who headed up the no campaign, also took to social media as well as to the airwaves, speaking with Telesur, also saying on his Twitter, "Congratulations to all of our activists. No movement on the yes side can obtain 36%, which is what we achieved. Worse in such a short time and in such an unequal struggle." Correa obviously highlighting the fact that despite the loss, his movement, which split from the ruling País Alliance, remains strong. Now, while this chapter of the Ecuadorian political saga comes to a close, things continue tomorrow with former President Correa having to testify at a hearing around the PetroChina case, where the pre-sale of Ecuadorian oil to China is being investigated.
That was Pablo Vivanco from Quito. Conservative Fabricio Alvarado Muñoz from the Evangelical National Restoration Party won first place in Sunday's first round of presidential elections in Costa Rica. Alvarado, who last month had only 3% of preferences, shot to prominence after denouncing a court ruling calling on Costa Rica to give civil marriage rights to same-sex couples. The election will go to a second round in April, when Alvarado will face former Labor Minister Carlos Alvarado Quesada.
Today we lived through a day where the invitation, more than just to vote, was to join together in a movement, like a Costa Rica which is great. Costa Rica is great. Today, Costa Ricans went out to vote. The message was clear. Costa Rica doesn't want more of the same.
The challenges that we face are great, not just in one matter, but in several matters. In economic matters, we have great challenges ahead. In the field of citizen safety, we have great challenges ahead. Climate change in a country so wonderful in its biodiversity also sets us great challenges, and the transformations we wish for urban mobility, for public transport, require from us a great job in this country.
A group of women in Heredia voted in Costa Rica's presidential election, dressed up as characters from the series The Handmaid's Tale, to protest for women's rights. In a new release, the group of women stated they were protesting for a secular state, since there's a lot of work to be done to reach a true equality. We vote for our rights, for our safety, for our freedom, they said. Videos and stills shared on social media show the women being cheered as they entered the polling stations and later casting their votes. We'll take a short break. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro said at a rally on Sunday that a date for the presidential election will be set this Monday. During a rally to commemorate former President Hugo Chavez and his first military civic uprising in 1992, Maduro asked his supporters to vote for him in exchange for economic prosperity, adding that he would like to have Henry Ramos Alup, the former Speaker of the opposition-controlled National Assembly, as an adversary.
I tell you, vote for Nicolás Maduro Moro, and I guarantee the economic prosperity, the growth of Venezuela in the years to come. I swear. I want the opposition to have Henry Ramos Alup as presidential candidate, to wallop him with the votes of the people on the day the National Electoral Council sets. I formally ask the government of Donald Trump to give permission to Ramos Ajup to become the candidate.
Bolivian President Evo Morales celebrated the day via Twitter, saying, "Greetings to Venezuela, especially to our brother Nicolás Maduro, in the day of national dignity. Today we remember our brother Hugo Chávez's insurrection in 1992. His legacy is the dignity of the Patria Grande, and today, more than ever, we will defend the sovereignty of our people." Our correspondent Laura Prada was at the march in Caracas and sent us this report. Caracas. President Maduro also rejected suggestions by the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson that the United States might introduce oil sanctions against Venezuela. Speaking in Argentina on his Latin American tour, Tillerson said the U.S. is considering restricting imports of Venezuelan crude and exports of U.S. refined products to Venezuela to put pressure on President Nicolás Maduro to, quote, return to constitution. Argentine Foreign Minister Jorge Faure said his country will closely follow the possibility of oil sale restrictions. Other Latin American governments have said they are unwilling to take steps that would worsen the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela.
Is also asking sanctioning the oil, or in effect prohibiting the oil to be sold in the United States, or for the United States as well to sell or provide oil to Venezuela or refined products, is something we continue to consider.
We go to Nicaragua, where Foreign Minister of Venezuela, Jorge Arreaza, is carrying out an intense weekend. On Sunday, he was received by governmental authorities there.
Avenue Bolívar Chávez in the heart of Managua is a symbol of the friendship between Nicaragua and Venezuela. Here we find Juana, a street vendor that assures us that the social projects between the two nations have impacted the quality of life of Nicaraguans.
There have been a lot of changes because they have made agreements for the good of the country. They have been creating jobs.
Precisely one of the purposes of the visit of the Foreign Affairs Ministers Jorge Arreaza is to review the agreements that already exist between the two nations in matters of agriculture, energy, and health. The politician has said that to confront the imperialist threats, the best tactic is to maintain peace and stability.
As we were in Cuba, we had to come to Nicaragua as well. And here there are the joint strategies to win, and we need to design them in this historical moment. And we have to constantly revise them. They cannot be static. They have to be flexible, and that is why we should keep in touch always.
The Venezuelan minister's visit to Nicaragua comes just before the Summit of the Americas that will take place in Peru in April, an event that is awaited with interest because of what the countries in ALBA have to say regarding Donald Trump's speech against several of its members.
Here we are confirming our brotherhood, our solidarity. Violence, war, and threats are not the way for peace, stability, and coexistence of the people in the world.
During his visit to Nicaragua, Arreaza talked with diplomats, intellectuals, and Nicaraguan artists. All of them condemned the measures taken against Venezuela, which they define as a clear international rights violation. The Venezuelan minister traveled on Sunday to the department of Atelia, 150 kilometers north of Managua, where he participated in acts of solidarity towards the Bolivarian Revolution organized by social movements in Nicaragua.
The Honduran opposition continued their street protests over what they say is election fraud. Chants of Fuera JOH filled the street of Tegucigalpa on Saturday as hundreds of Hondurans protested against the fraud that led to the re-election of President Juan Orlando Hernández and the avoidance of the disputed elections on behalf of the Organization of American States and the United Nations. After a month of recess, the Brazilian Congress resumes its work. The most pressing matter in the agenda is the pension system reform proposed by President Michel Temer, which is widely rejected by workers and social movements in the country.
Political parties, workers' unions, and social organizations like Brazil's Popular Front announced a national protest with public acts, assemblies, and marches on February 19th, the day the pension reform goes to a vote in the lower house.
The real problem is the gap by the state, the blackmail, the lack of scruples in the way this illegitimate government is operating. But Social Security has the conditions to continue strong and supporting the Brazilian people. It's only about abiding by the law and not benefiting banks over the damage to the population, like this corrupt and illegitimate government is doing.
De facto President Michel Temer is making a great effort to assure he gets the 308 votes he needs to approve the reform. His most recent attempt was during a popular TV show from the private network SBT.
This week we saw the president in a TV show defending the pension reform, making a fool out of himself to the whole country. That leaves all Brazilians in shame, but we can't stay in that shame. We have to go out and fight. The task we have ahead is to strengthen the fight with more energy.
According to analysts, this election year in Brazil will be very difficult to approve in Congress, such an unpopular measure without citizen support.
A year of electoral dispute depends on many factors, but specifically on the legislative agenda, the tendency is for it to become more difficult, especially after the second semester, the vote on controversial and important topics.
Workers continue to denounce the deceitful propaganda by the government, which doesn't warn people of the impacts of this measure. They also announced protests to prevent what they call a regression of rights.
Black History Month 2018 opening program kicked off in musical style in Barbados on Sunday. The Pan-African Coalition of Organizations thanked Indira Gonzalez, head of the Venezuelan embassy in Barbados, and her staff for attending the opening ceremony, also attended by David Denny, trade unionist and members of Friends of Venezuela in Barbados, and with performances by Gabi. Tequila is synonymous with Mexico, but the country is facing a crisis of success. It is having trouble keeping up with appetites across the world, and that could end up hurting the tequila economy.
From New York to Tokyo, more and more people are developing a taste for tequila. But the quicker they snap up the bottles, the more dire the situation becomes in Jalisco, the heart of the tequila industry.
Now we are selling more tequila with 100% agave, which is obviously twice as much agave as standard tequila. Its popularity was not expected to grow so fast, so now there is more demand than supply. So the price of agave has grown a lot.
But the tequila crisis can't just be blamed on the drinkers.
If we go back, the agave was only used for tequila, but now it is not just used in tequila. Today, it is used for its inulin, which is a probiotic. It is used to make syrup for sweetener, it is used in distilled beverage, and it is used for tequila. So, there is more demand than supply.
In the last 2 years, agave prices have soared by 700%, threatening to put many tequila makers out of business. Adding salt to the wound, rising prices are leading to theft.
Agave theft is affecting all plantations, from small producers to big industries with their own plantations. It's a phenomenon. I repeat, it has gone up in the last 2 years, and that goes hand in hand with the price. When it used to cost 50 centavos, approximately $3 nobody was interested in stealing it.
Cuando costaba 50 centavos, pues no interesaba, a nadie le interesaba robar.
The agave plant needs to grow at least 8 to 10 years to make a tasty tipple. To compensate for the shortage, producers are now selling their crops before they've matured. The problem is, younger plants don't produce much, forcing farmers to use even more plants. Producers warn the shortage will continue for at least 3 more years until improved planting strategies bear fruit. A stark reality for tequila makers and drinkers.
We'll take one last short break. Join us after a look at what our multimedia team is reporting. Welcome back. Syrian Kurds marched yet again on Sunday in the northern Syrian city of Afrin, denouncing the military operation by the Turkish army against the Kurdish YPG forces in Syria's Kurdish enclave. Ankara and allied rebels launched Operation Olive Branch on January 20th against the Kurdish People's Protection Units, which Turkey has blacklisted as terrorists.
We will not bow our heads to Erdogan. We are not afraid of him and will never fear him.
We are the ones that fought the terrorists. We fought them from Afrin to Deir ez-Zor, and we fought on behalf of the whole world. But today, the world has agreed to allow the Syrian people to be killed.
Guinea has held its first local elections since the end of the era of military dictatorship, following 8 years of delays. The municipal council elections, originally scheduled for 2010, have been repeatedly delayed in the West African country due to a lack of funds, political infighting, and the Ebola crisis. More than 5.9 million Guineans registered to vote in the polls. Moving ahead, let's have a look at some stories from around the world.
Tens of thousands of Greeks rallied outside the parliament in Athens on Sunday protesting against the use of the term Macedonia in any settlement the government pursues with its Balkan neighbor to end a decades-old name row. Greeks were irked after the small Balkan country, for decades a part of the former Yugoslavia, gained independence in 1991 and wanted to call itself Macedonia, the same name as Greece's northern Macedonia region. The latest protests come after Greece and Macedonia, mediated by the United Nations, restarted talks last month to resolve the naming dispute.
Macedonia is one and only Greek, and we don't give in any politician to keep our name to other country.
Belgium is on high alert as the last surviving suspect in the 2015 Paris attacks, Salah Abdel Salam, stands trial in Brussels over a shootout on the 15th of March 2016 that led to his capture. 3 police officers were wounded and a fellow attacker was killed. Abdel Salam, a Belgian-born French national of Moroccan origin, was arrested 4 months after the Paris attacks. South Korea's presidential Blue House has welcomed the North Korea ceremonial leader Kim Jong-nam's unprecedented visit to South Korea as hopes grow for high-level inter-Korean talks during the Winter Olympics that begin in 4 days. Kim Jong-nam is the most senior North Korean official to cross the border into the south since the Korean War ended with a truce in 1953.
Kim's visit shows North Korea's resolve for improved inter-Korean relations and the success of the Olympics, as well as its sincere, earnest attitude.
South Africa's ruling African National Congress Party is holding meetings to decide the fate of President Jacob Zuma, who is under growing pressure to step down amid corruption allegations. Zuma has rejected ANC's request to stand down. He has been fighting for his political survival as pressure mounts on him to resign before a key national address this week. Philadelphia Eagles supporters came out en masse to celebrate their team's first Super Bowl victory over the New England Patriots. The Eagles won the 52nd Super Bowl by beating the New England Patriots by 41-33 in what is called an extraordinary encounter.
And with this, we've come to the end of this morning news brief. There's so many other stories. You can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.